Every single tonne of carbon dioxide we emit matters, and reaching net zero as fast as possible is crucial to prevent the worst impacts of human-caused climate change.
But in a modern world built almost entirely on extracting and burning fossil fuels, how can we swiftly reduce our emissions while retaining a functioning economy, society, and political system?
In this episode, we speak to Roger Dargaville of Monash University about the transition to net zero.
Are we on track? How fast can we realistically move? And what are the logistical, technological, and societal challenges to going green at the pace required?
We did it. I did it.
One take. First time.
Oops, my levels are a bit high. But yeah, usually it takes me about 3 or 4 because I just can't read and talk at the same time.
But you did it.
I did it. This is
with a
because I
little
practiced.
bit of preparation.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. I think I speak quite quietly unless I'm excited or drunk. And so I'm finding myself doing like jazz host, like...
You do. It's very calming.
That's nice. Yeah.
Don't take this the wrong way, but something you could listen if you needed to go to sleep.
Yeah, okay.
Just soothe you straight into it.
Now we're going to listen to some Coltrane.
My name is Sarah Perkins Kirkpatrick, and I'm a professor of climate science at the Australian National University in Canberra.
I'm Ian Strachan, a former journalist turned science communicator. We're members of the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence for the Weather of the 21st Century.
And this is Totally Cooked, the climate and weather podcast.
Wow.
Done.
Now, I think you'll be gratified to know that I was suddenly feeling the pressure there.
Oh, really?
I'm like, she's on today. She's
I am
not
on.
fucking up.
Yep,
What if I start fucking up? What if we swap around and I become the laughing stock, the running joke?
You know what it is? I haven't had to get up to 3 kids this morning. I've actually didn't sleep that well, but still I've just been able to do what I want to do and not have to deal with chaos.
So you're saying that your professional performance lifts when your children aren't a factor?
Yes.
So by extension, that must mean that your kids are more important than the climate crisis.
No, I can't answer that.
Think about the research you could achieve if they weren't on the scene.
But they're my children. I'm doing it for them.
Which is
It
your
drives
favorite?
me.
Which is your favorite child?
I'm not answering that question. I don't have a favourite. They actually asked me who's my favourite PhD student. It's like I can't choose, just like I can't choose between you. I can sometimes name my least favourite depending on the day, but yeah, that changes obviously.
Who's your favourite PhD student?
Not saying, don't have one.
Who's your favourite member of the engagement team?
Not saying, don't have one.
Who's your favourite member of the partnerships portfolio's technical function? Our guest today is Associate Professor Roger Dargaville of the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Monash University. Welcome to the show, Roger.
Thanks, Ian. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's lovely to have you.
Okay, so the Australian government recently set an emissions target. See? Big words.
Oh no, you were doing so well.
You've got to give me words that have like no more than 5 letters in them.
The second sentence has very few words.
That's true. It's got a lot of numbers though. The Australian government recently set an emissions reduction target of 62 to 70% below 2005 levels by 2035. That is a mouthful. And we're still aiming for net zero by 2050. So 2 questions for you, Roger. What is net zero and are we on track to reach it?
Net zero implies that as a nation, we don't emit any carbon to the atmosphere, but it's subtle because you can still burn some fossil fuel, but it's countered by terrestrial sinks. And so in Australia, this was very clever negotiations that we set 2005 as the benchmark year. We were doing a lot of deforestation in that year. And so when we stop deforesting and we allow forests to regrow, you get a drawdown of carbon from the atmosphere. So that counts as a carbon sink. It allows us to still burn fossil fuel, but claim that our emissions are going down.
Okay.
So our fossil fuel emissions, especially from transport, have not decreased. They've in fact gone up. Electricity emissions have gone down a bit, about 30 to 40%, which is not bad.
That's not bad.
But overall, if you didn't count the biosphere sink that we do count, overall carbon emissions haven't really changed. But we're still meeting Kyoto and Paris targets because of that 2005 baseline. So
given these new targets that have been set, so up to 70% by 2035, are we on track to do that?
So it gets harder because that biosphere sink is not increasing.
Yeah, right.
So
we're not going to put any more trees back.
Well, I mean, we've still got a carbon sink, but it's not getting bigger, and it will equilibrate eventually and stop soaking up much excess carbon. So we actually have to reduce the fossil emissions.
Yeah.
And so except for the electricity sector, we're coming at it from more or less from a standing start. Yeah. So transport emissions have been going up, industry emissions have been going up.
Yeah.
Fugitive emissions, fortunately, are coming down.
So what's the fugitive emission?
So that's when methane and carbon dioxide escapes from gas pipelines, mining operations.
Right.
So when you've got coal seam gas, for example, a fair bit of that methane escapes to the atmosphere. It's a relatively straightforward fix to plug the holes to stop it from happening. And because the methane especially is a valuable commodity, you don't want it leaking to the atmosphere anyway. So the industry were reasonably proactive in reducing the fugitive emissions, but there still are significant fugitive emissions. So that's an important area to
Have you all seen the
on.
movie with Tommy Lee Jones and Harrison Ford in The Fugitive? You know, where he's framed for murder?
I know the movie. I don't think I've seen it.
Have you seen it, Roger?
Yeah. Is it the one-armed man?
Yeah, exactly.
He
did. The one-armed man did it, not Harrison Ford. And there's this very famous scene where, like, Tommy Lee Jones has cornered him in like a pipe leading to, you know, a dam overspill, right? And Tommy Lee Jones has got a gun on Harrison Ford, and Harrison Ford's like, "I didn't kill my wife," and Tommy Lee Jones is like, "I don't care." And I'm thinking of like, you know, him hunting down mining companies, the fugitive methane. Yeah, I didn't emit any methane. I don't care.
Yeah. So basically, we've gotten to our current target, or almost met some of our targets, just from some crafty accounting and dodgy politics.
Yeah,
she said it.
Pretty much.
I'm meant to be apolitical.
So yeah, I mean the Australian negotiators at the Kyoto Protocol in 2000 and whenever that was, but making 2005 the baseline year was very strategic for Australia, and it made us able to meet our targets much more easily. Now, to give credit where it's due, our electricity sector emissions have been coming down quite well, and having the renewable energy target, the safeguard mechanism now, feed-in tariffs for rooftop PV, etc., a whole bunch of really good proactive policies have seen a dramatic shift, and we're now at 40% of our electricity comes from wind, solar, and hydro. That's
awesome.
And it's continuing to increase. We're seeing coal-fired power stations shut down, growth in batteries, etc., transmission line build out. It's all progressing quite well, but it could be faster for sure.
Okay.
A quick clarification for anyone listening at home who doesn't know this: PV is photovoltaics, which essentially means solar power. Just in case you were not aware. What was I going to say?
I've got a question.
Please do. Please question.
Something about carbon sinks in forestry. So something that gets me a bit is, yes, obviously trees can soak up carbon dioxide. They can store it in the soil. But what if there's a fire and those trees burn down? What happens then?
Well, if the ecosystem is allowed to return back to its normal state, the carbon will be reabsorbed again. And when the forest comes into equilibrium, then it is storing, on average, a certain amount of carbon. And so forest fires, especially in Australia, is a very natural part of the ecosystem. So my first postdoc was in Fairbanks, Alaska, and I was working with a group that was looking very specifically at the carbon budget of forests and looking at that fire, regrowth, succession process. And it was really interesting to see how the carbon budget changed with fires. One of the many problems, of course, is that with climate change, often the forests are not returning back to their native long-term state, and they're going from woody biomass to more grassland type ecosystems, which has a lot less carbon.
Yeah, okay. So it may not be as much of a saviour towards net zero or much of a mechanism towards net zero as what we would like it or hope it to be.
And while biosphere sinks are nice, once the carbon is released from burning fossil fuel, it's in the system forever. And so the only real long-term solution to reducing atmospheric carbon dioxide is to stop burning fossil fuel.
Cool. Good.
Within the kind of specialists that you work with, the people who understand net zero and the energy transition very intimately, what's the sort of professional view on how much we're relying on that carbon sink biosphere angle of our targets? Like, it seems to me to be a real
scapegoat,
a cop-out.
Yeah, I'm not sure that many people actually appreciate that that's how we're meeting our target, and that if you look at all the fossil fuel sectors that, except for electricity, we're doing extremely poorly. That's not widely known. But I mean, we shouldn't be surprised. And until January this year, we didn't have a vehicle emission policy. There was no limit to how efficient vehicles had to be. And so,
really?
And so we were the last OECD country
to
introduce
that's so embarrassing.
Emission requirements. And they're starting off quite weak, so you can still drive your Toyota Hilux with no penalty. But from about 2027 onwards, the emission from those vehicles have to be offset by more efficient vehicles. And there'll be a gradually declining baseline, which means it's more and more difficult to sell high-emitting vehicles.
And does that include like heavy transport vehicles, like big trucks?
No, it's only up to, I think it's 3-ton trucks. Like, your sort of mini delivery van is the largest vehicle that's being considered under the new vehicle emission scheme.
And is that because there really isn't any viable, hybrid or electric equivalent for very large goods vehicles?
Yeah, it's a different set of problems. Electric for passenger vehicles works perfectly well. For long-haul transport, it's much more complicated. So, especially those B-double trucks going into remote areas. So the Hume Highway, probably a great place to be having electric trucks because they can recharge at big charging stations. But if they're going out into remote areas, that'll probably still be run on diesel for a long time.
Interesting. So that's transport. What about the mix of energy sources in Australia currently? What are the proportion of renewables versus fossil fuels? What's the lay of the land there?
So since about 2010, we've been increasing the amount of wind and solar. Prior to that, we were about 20% hydro power.
20%? I didn't realise it was that high.
Well, but as a proportion, it's been decreasing.
Yeah, okay.
With time as our electricity growth has increased. So it's only about 5% now. Actually, maybe 20%. Globally, it's 20%.
Yeah.
Maybe for Australia, it's a bit less.
Higher than I thought.
Hydropower is an extremely important contributor to our electricity sector. It's the renewable energy technology that is fully dispatchable within the water reservoir. How much water you've got in your reservoir limits. So obviously you can't keep running the hydro until the water runs out. But as long as there's water in the reservoir, you can dispatch the power, send it onto the grid whenever you want. Whereas wind and solar, you're dependent on when it's windy and when it's sunny. So solar panels are never going to work at nighttime. Obviously, we need the wind to be blowing for your wind turbines to work.
My kids have often asked, Mum, why don't the solar panels work at night? And then, I've explained to them, well, the moon reflects some of the sunlight. Well, that should be enough. So maybe we need to make moon panels.
Shout out to Ned Eakins-Dorks at UNSW, who I used to work with in a previous Centre of Excellence, Exciton Science. He is pioneering very, 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 very early proof of concept around what, in a kind of cheesy way, we called solar power at night. It's not the sun. It's actually absorbing infrared radiation.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So the sun heats the Earth's surface during the day. When it gets colder at night, we lose that heat back out into space as evaporation. Not evaporation.
Have I taught you nothing?
No, that is not what I meant. As infrared radiation, and they are testing out how you might be able to capture that.
Do you know how many watts per square meter you get from the outgoing?
Tiny. It's tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is like 100 years in the future, we might be able to use this at scale.
So it's a very small fraction of what we can get from solar panels, I can imagine. Yeah.
So I mean, at solar noon, with the sun directly overhead, you've got 1,000 watts per square meter of incoming solar radiation.
Jeez, I didn't realise it was that much.
So that's for every square meter, that's a powerful microwave operating. So it's a lot of energy.
It is a lot of energy.
So a solar panel can convert about 20% of that into electricity. So it's not particularly efficient. But when your fuel is free, you don't care so much. Yeah. But I think it's worth remembering just how much solar energy is available. Now, of course, that's at solar noon, and that only happens in the middle of the day. And so a lot of the time, the amount of power available is a lot less, and at night time it's zero. So over the average of a year, you're running at about 20% capacity factor. So compared to if you could run your solar panel at 100% output all the time, you only get 20% of that output, and you can only convert about 20% of the available energy. So overall, the power output of an individual solar panel is not enormous, but they're cheap to manufacture, relatively speaking. No moving parts, no maintenance, no fuel costs. So
once they're on their own,
it's absolutely magical technology when you think about it.
It is. We Ian's heard this gripe many times. We have solar panels, but where we live, everyone's been incentivized to get solar panels, which is great. Like, I think that's amazing. But unfortunately, there's too much solar in the grid, and every day for about this time of the year in spring, our solar panel shut down for about 3 hours because the voltage is too high. So there's it's great that this technology exists, and you're right, you put it on, you're done, right? It should just work. But there's a long way to go in making sure our grid can handle the extra energy or the input at solar noon and around that time frame as well.
So the answer to that problem is energy storage.
Yes.
And we're seeing a very big increase in the amount of batteries being deployed around the country, both large-scale grid-connected batteries like the Hornsdale Power Reserve was the first one that went in not long after the South Australian blackout.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Which at the time was 100 megawatts. 100 megawatt hours was the biggest battery in the world.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that was, if you remember, Mike Cannon-Brookes challenged Elon Musk.
Oh, I didn't realise Mike Cannon-Brookes had a...
Yeah, so it was on Twitter.
Yeah.
That platform that shall not be mentioned.
Yep.
Cannon-Brookes said to Musk, I bet you can't get a 100 megawatt battery installed in 3 months. And they did it.
Because Elon's got an enormous ego.
But it's just...
But it's worked.
The battery technology. So, I mean, the 3 months was from when the connection agreement was signed.
Yeah.
And because all you need to do, it's obviously a bit more complicated than this, is lay a concrete slab, put your shipping containers with your batteries in, build your switching yard and connect it all together. Whereas building solar farms and wind farms and everything else takes so much more effort.
I'd like to ask about the embedded energy costs in solar manufacturing as well, because my understanding is that we still need fossil fuels to power the manufacturing plants that refine the silicon to make the solar panels. So how long does it take for them to pay that off?
So the energy it takes, or carbon emissions it takes to make a solar panel, it takes about 1 year of operation, give or take. Depends on your solar resource and which kind of solar panels we're talking about. But it's an interesting process. To make silicon from silicon dioxide, or quartz, the raw materials, you need to make carbon monoxide to rip the oxygen atoms off the quartz to make pure silicon. And the only way, that's the only pathway you can use. And so carbon monoxide, because it's got carbon in it, the source for that is coal. And so there actually isn't a viable pathway to make pure silicon other than using coal.
I didn't know that. I feel a bit dirty.
There's an irony there as well, though.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It really is.
So we've done some calculations, and if you wanted to power the entire world's economy using solar panels, and you look at how much carbon we've got left in the global budget to avoid 2 degrees of warming, we actually need to reserve about a quarter to a third of that budget to make all the solar panels, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And what about when those solar panels that you've used the majority of the world's remaining coal and carbon budget, what happens when they then reach the end of their lifespan?
Well, you can reprocess the silicon. So it's still pure silicon.
Okay.
So you don't need to remake it from scratch again. But it actually is a very energy-intensive process to repurify the silicon. But that's energy that you can do with renewables. You don't have to emit carbon for that process.
So once they're made...
Yeah, but the thing is, we need gigawatts of solar panels to meet our targets. We're about 5 or 6% of the world's electricity comes from solar at the moment. So we've got to build 5-10 times more than what we have at the moment.
This is fascinating.
It is fascinating.
Along with wind turbines and hydropower and batteries.
And, as well as Ned's crazy infrared energy scheme, there are also lots of people out there researching how to make solar or photovoltaics not using silicon. So
yes, indeed.
Things like perovskites.
Perovskites, organic polymers, quantum dots, dye-sensitized solar cells are all alternatives that don't use silicon. They use other semiconductor-type materials. They all have fantastic potential, but nothing's gotten close to the efficiency or longevity of silicon yet.
Yep, I think if I remember correctly, so perovskites, which is a solution-processed solar cell, you can make it using wet materials in a lab, have reached similar efficiency levels, but they degrade very quickly in real-world conditions. So they don't like the sun, funnily enough. You put them under the sun, it starts to mess with the molecules inside, and they become...
The crystal structure starts to break down, and if the crystal structure isn't pure and regular, then the photoelectric effect starts to become very inefficient.
Yeah. I think I wrote a story once about a solar cell that was allergic to sunlight.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. You need to dig that up, I think.
I can find it for you.
Well, it's the UV radiation that messes with the crystal structure, but it's the visible part of the spectrum that you want to capture to turn into electricity.
Right.
So it's different parts. The high energy part of the spectrum messes with the cells.
Everything. Well, that's what burns our skin, right? So
exactly.
Yeah,
yes.
It's a dangerous one. So I think Ian touched on this before. So you mentioned that there's like roughly a year of energy intensive emissions or something that goes into generating the solar panels.
So the solar panel will displace, if it's displacing coal-fired power, it takes 1 year for it to avoid the carbon emissions equivalent that went into making it.
Oh, okay.
It's like to paying off itself.
Yes, yeah.
So it'll pay for its carbon emissions in 1 year, and then it will operate for 20, 25 years of carbon-free.
So in reality, it's
power.
like 1/20th of what?
Yeah. So it's not a bad payback.
No, it's amazing.
It's pretty good. Yeah. So
it pays back the carbon faster than it pays back the financial outlay of buying the solar panels.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, especially with today's tariffs.
The reason why people talk about this is back in the 70s when solar cell technology first became available commercially, very expensive to manufacture silicon, very low efficiency. The payback period, the carbon payback period actually was about the lifetime of the cells because they were much worse technology. But the technology has evolved so much, the silicon processing has evolved so much that now we're at this 20-to-1 payback. But people still dig out that old data and go, solar cells don't pay for themselves.
Yeah, I've had that thrown at me a few times.
Yeah, but it's really ancient data.
People cherry picking and misrepresenting data to support their denial and delay arguments.
People do that.
Unbelievable. I would like to ask about wind power, please.
Good.
So people here at 21st Century Weather are researching where the best places to put wind farms are in Australia, what the kind of cycles of daily wind flow is like. I was really surprised to learn, coming from the UK where there are a lot of offshore wind farms visible from my parents' house, that we don't have any offshore wind in Australia yet.
That's right. No offshore. Lots of proposals underway, especially in Bass Strait off Wilson's Prom. There's Star of the South has a very large project, 2 gigawatts proposed. That's the most mature, but there are other projects proposed off Hunter Valley, off the coast of New South Wales, and also on the coast of WA. But the reason why you don't see much offshore wind in Australia yet is we've still got plenty of onshore options. We haven't run out of land, not by a long way. It's actually getting quite difficult to find places you can connect to the grid. That's the most difficult problem at the moment. But unlike the UK, which is a relatively small, highly populated, densely populated island, we have no shortage of land. So offshore wind is quite a lot more expensive to build. So if you've got onshore options still, that's what you go with.
There you go. I didn't know that.
No, me either. I thought it'd just be better quality. I don't know, more consistent wind offshore.
Definitely higher capacity factors, more consistent.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing from the analysis is that the offshore wind, for example, off Gippsland, will provide power when the onshore wind farms are not providing power.
Right.
So that sort of anti or uncorrelation is a really nice feature.
Yeah.
And that adds a lot of value to the offshore wind. So when we look at these things, we talk about cost a lot. And solar panels are the cheapest, and then onshore wind, and then offshore wind. But the value of the different technologies is very different. And as we were saying earlier, in the middle of the day, your solar power is worthless because there's a glut in the market.
We just can't use it.
So it can't be used. And so even though it's cheap, it's not worth that much. Whereas your wind farm power producing in the evening and overnight is more valuable, and your offshore wind will be even more valuable again. So it will sustain the higher economic cost. I always have to tell my student the difference between value and cost is really important to appreciate.
Yeah. They've just announced in parts of Australia that we'll get free solar or free power for 3 hours a day because of the excess solar, which I think is amazing and will help people use that excess and hopefully take the pressure off at other points of time in the day.
So most energy users these days have a time of use tariff where energy is expensive during the peak times and less expensive during the off-peak time.
Like naturally in the middle of the day, that's not a peak time. I thought morning and night, they were the traditional
Yeah,
peak
so
times.
the sort of breakfast time and dinner time are your peak times, and they're peak because that's when at home we're using all our appliances and things. And during the day, our energy use is quite high as well. We've got a lot of solar, and so the net demand on the grid actually drops. So having a time of use tariff that just goes to zero in the middle of the day is just a natural extension of what we already have. It's not as dramatic as what people seem to be making out. And we really do want to see energy consumers shifting as much of their demand into the middle of the day as possible. The problem is it's not that easy because a lot of us aren't at home during the day.
Got smart appliances these days though.
But
just tell it. Maybe I'm being naive.
Get me a skinny cap because I'm running late.
Well, here I am, complete place of privilege. I'll just plug my car into charge between 12 and 3 and set my dishwasher and washing machine to go at these times. And
So your car, definitely, your EV, charge that in the middle of the day if it's at home. But of course, if you've driven it to work,
well, yeah,
then,
you've got a point.
Then you don't have it. Running your air conditioning is probably and your electric heating will be the next most energy intensive thing.
Yes.
Run them in the middle of the day. But if you're not at home, what's the point of that?
Well, that's, yeah.
So
Aircon could work in summer, but winter, it's another story.
If your house is really well insulated, then it actually makes a lot of sense to pre-cool or pre-warm it. But most homes are dreadfully badly insulated, and that doesn't work.
Well, in the UK where we have central heating, what Australians I sometimes refer to as hydronic heating. We're talking about a radiator against the wall full of water. And you put your thermostat on for an hour in the morning and maybe an hour mid to late afternoon in the winter. The boiler heats up the water in the radiators, and because the houses are well insulated, it then stays warm after only a short amount of it being on. Yep. Whereas I was just thinking when Roger was explaining that, well, it's bloody useless because, as soon as you turn the air conditioning off or the heater off in Australia, it's gone. It's like while it's on, it's heating or cooling the home. Once it's off, there is no impact. Because we live in tents. Glorified tents.
We even have double glazing on every window, extra insulation, the whole shebang, and we still notice that. Like we even, the gaps around some of our doors, despite being a 6-star energy rating house, it's ridiculous.
It just won't be sealed properly. Yeah,
exactly. So, let alone houses that are just built to traditional standards.
No, it's a big problem.
Yeah.
Sarah took us back to solar power. I was still going on wind.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's fine. It was an interesting little digression. But I wanted to ask why you mentioned off the Hunter Valley, off the Bass Strait, and in WA. Given that we have this, enormous amount of coastline, why is offshore wind being planned for those areas?
So the offshore wind resources are high capacity factor, so you get more energy per turbine. So that's a good thing. The offshore wind resource does not necessarily correlate with the onshore wind resource, and so when the wind isn't blowing for the onshore wind farms, it might still be blowing for the offshore, and so that gives you a lot more resilience of supply within the system. So these are the reasons why we're looking at offshore. Plus, there's the things like you don't have to deal with landowners when you build offshore. There are still significant environmental impacts, and there is a visual amenity impact because it's to build them over the horizon is a long way off the coast. So it's not a slam dunk, but there are fewer challenges in terms of environmental impact and community engagement for offshore.
And is there a specific reason why those parts of the coastline are being chosen?
So one of the big challenges for new renewable energy projects, either wind or solar onshore, is finding places you can connect into transmission networks. And so the Latrobe Valley in Victoria is traditionally the big central location for coal-fired power stations. So there's lots of transmission capacity coming out of Latrobe Valley. So if you can have an offshore wind farm that feeds into that trunk line of transmission, you're not going to have to deal with transmission constraints. And as the coal-fired power stations shut down, it actually makes a lot of sense to make use of those existing transmission corridors. So Gippsland's actually not conventionally known as a windy part of Victoria. It's more of the western side of the state is typically better wind resources. But because the offshore wind resource in Bass Strait is actually really good, the extra expense will be offset by reducing the cost of having to build new transmission capacity.
And is there programs underway or incentives planned to help to retrain people that have been working in coal-fired power in Gippsland and other parts of Australia to make the transition into wind power or other renewables?
So one of the big challenges with the renewable energy transition is the shift from traditional coal and gas jobs to renewables, and often the locations are not the same. And so, again, another reason for looking at Gippsland for offshore wind is that there are going to be new jobs during the manufacturing of offshore wind farms for skill sets that are not dissimilar to what you have in the fossil fuel industry. You need welders and truck drivers, and these fundamental skill sets that you need to build big infrastructure. So it shouldn't be a huge walk for a lot of employees currently in the fossil fuel sector to move into the renewable sector. Fingers crossed.
It's a real job, Sarah. Welders, truck drivers,
not looking
climate scientists,
not doing field work,
engagement, impact,
pretend jobs. Yes,
pretend jobs like podcast. You mentioned something that kind of stuck with me with the I guess, what it looks like or to see these wind farms offshore, and you don't want them in your line of sight. Surely, looking at a wind farm or a bunch of wind turbines, even a bunch of solar panels, is far more appealing than a big fat hole in the ground where coal could come from.
Couldn't agree more.
I am amazed at the opposition to wind farms from a visual perspective.
Agree.
It happens in the UK as well. Like people are, but they also oppose power transmission lines,
That I kind of understand a little bit more, but obviously living, in a world where we heavily rely on electricity, it's a necessary evil.
But isn't it interesting that people want the electricity, they want the energy, but they don't want to see it. They want it to be invisible.
The funny thing about transmission lines is, and I see this almost every day on my ride into work. I ride in along Gardeners Creek bike path, which follows the freeway. And it's actually a really nice bit of parkland. And you've got the creek and there's birds and trees and it's very lovely. But every once in a while you realise the path is actually going underneath the high voltage transmission lines. Good. And so through this bit of parkland, following along the freeway, are these 500 kV power lines. But because they're always there, you just don't notice them.
Yeah, right. Well, under the vegetation,
they just sort of blend into the landscape.
Yeah.
So I think with a lot of this kind of infrastructure that does cause visual amenity impacts is that when you're looking at a pristine environment and thinking about, well, it's going to look terrible when you put all these industrial structures all over it, once they're there and you're used to them, it doesn't make that much difference. And they're all over the landscape anyway. And when I say pristine environment, what we're talking about actually most of the time is farmland, which is a long way from pristine anyway. Yeah. It's already been effectively industrialised.
Every time we drive to Sydney, coming from Canberra, go up via Lake George, and there's all these wind turbines along the way. And I think, yes, it's a man-made structure, but there's something quite gracious and mesmerising seeing them move in the wind.
Yeah.
They weren't there when I was a child, but it's nice having conversations with my kids about what they are and why they're there. I guess I'm biased, but argument like, they look ugly.
We need more appreciation for the beauty and utility of major civil engineering projects.
Exactly.
Dams, power lines.
Oh, yes. Oh.
Comrades.
A beautiful parabolic concrete hydro dam is a thing of beauty as well.
Love a dam.
Yep. You'll go well in Tasmania. They love them down there.
Yeah, love a dam.
But you can also put power lines underground. Like a lot of all new suburbs have power lines underground.
So the high voltage long distance power lines put underground is really expensive.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Because the amount of insulation you need to put around the high voltage lines is extraordinary. So
that's a really good point.
You actually end up essentially building a tunnel underground, and it ends up being many times more expensive.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Our colleague Ailey, who actually leads our weather resources project in the Centre of Excellence and has been on the podcast recently talking about weather resources, she was attending a Victorian government inquiry into climate resilience and was asked a very off-topic question for her by a member of parliament or a senator from up in the kind of Riverina region about whether large-scale or even medium-scale solar farms would cause a microclimate, and this question had been put to her by wine growers. They were concerned that if you build, it was solar panels. It was like if she was genuinely asked if we start building these solar farms, will they affect the grapes? And poor Ailey, she dealt with it quite well, but it's like, where is this coming from? That is such a stretch of a way of raising maybe it's, they've heard that somewhere and they're asking a legitimate question, but that seemed to me to be a desperate, reach for a problem.
It actually is partially true. They do have a microclimate impact because you're changing the solar radiation budget.
But how micro is micro as well?
So I think once you're 100 metres away from the solar farm, it's unmeasurable.
Yeah, okay.
But if you actually put temperature probes, measure the temperature profile over the solar farm itself, you do see a difference.
Okay.
Because, it's not surprising. You're absorbing a quarter of the solar radiation that would otherwise be going into the system.
Right?
And it is.
So it'll be better for the grapes. Done.
Well, it depends how much cooler. Wine is a delicate, grapes delicate, aren't they?
And all change is bad.
We're negating global warming at that scale, which is not global warming. But anyway, we're removing some of that extra temperature by absorbing it into the solar panels. The grapes will be better.
But you want, depending on what kind of wine you're growing, sometimes you want the grapes to be really hot. Like Shiraz and Cab Sav needs hot summers, right?
But they're still going to burn in Hunter Valley in 30 years' time. Sorry.
True.
We should get a sommelier on and talk about climate change and wine.
Yes, and we can have a wine tasting at the same time.
Fuck yeah.
Yep. On it. Let's do it.
Sorry, Roger, you've got the morning. You've got the morning show.
What's his name? Professor Snow somebody is the wine.
Snowden.
No.
That's where I went to.
I can't remember his last name, but it's a professor at Melbourne University.
Oh, yeah.
I think he invested some of his research funds in buying a vineyard.
Okay.
I need to come down to Melbourne for that podcast episode. It needs to be done in the afternoon on a Friday.
We'll go to the Yarra Valley or the Mornington Peninsula.
Yeah, sounds good.
Excellent. I'm in.
Zach can drive us.
Was I invited?
Maybe we should have like a, reunion of all of our previous eps.
Totally corked.
That's the best one yet.
Thank you so much. I'm not even drunk yet.
But this is the thing. So, back on that question that Ailey got at the inquiry, my understanding was the question was coming to her because they were thinking it might heat up the microclimate. And I get it. I can imagine two people having a conversation I don't know how it's going to affect the grapes without any scientific backing. But to have that sort of question filter down without any understanding of it to a senator or a member of government, there seems to be a lot of backlash and misunderstanding flung without having the science background.
People are naturally cautious of change, and they don't want things that are going to affect their farm output.
Again, not in my backyard.
And if somebody starts spouting information that says there's a problem, they're going to latch onto it. And there's a natural tendency to absorb bits of information that you think are going to be important for your way of life, and you amplify them and you stress about them. And
yeah, no, that's true. And there's that's a whole section of science communication and
directionally motivated reasoning, which is where you take the information and you process it through your pre-existing lenses and biases, and you're not assessing it. I don't think anyone is able to assess a piece of information completely in isolation of their pre-existing context.
We're all biased. We'll have confirmation bias, certainly.
But I think the fact of the matter is solar panels are better for grapes because it makes it slightly cooler. Global warming's going to make it worse. Solar panels will sort it out for them.
That was pretty much Ailey's point, very diplomatically put, after pivoting quickly. But it's an interesting point that, yes, it would change the immediate land surface coverage.
If you look globally at how much of the incoming solar radiation you would need to capture to power the world's economy, it's a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the total. So even if we build enough solar panels to power the entire world's economy, it makes virtually no difference to the overall solar energy budget. So if you extrapolate that out, yes, at directly adjacent to a solar farm, you might see small differences, but regionally, it scientifically, it can't make any difference.
So chill out, grape growers. Solar's got your back. Bottle up those concerns.
Should be much more worried about the climate change impacts on ability to grow grapes in certain regions.
Exactly right. We mentioned Mike Cannon-Brookes earlier, and I remember that he had a harebrained scheme, which doesn't seem to have happened, to pretty much turn most of the Northern Territory, or not quite.
Tiny fraction of the Northern
Territory, but still an enormous area, into a big fat solar farm and sell the electricity to Singapore or something.
Isn't that so? I thought that was I've heard rumblings, not that it's going, but it's still still rumbling.
Yes. I thought it was unrumbled.
So the project's called Sun Cable. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's completely dead, but it was certainly very avant-garde at the time, and probably...
Is this pre-pandemic, like 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, for sure. I had one of my PhD students, my favourite PhD student actually.
Name?
Cheng Long.
Why favourite?
Because it was so long ago. I think he was my only PhD student at the time. I now have many PhD students.
Is he still your favourite?
Like your favourite ever, or favourite at the time when if he was your favourite at the time when you only had one, that's not such a big scoop.
Yeah. It's very hard to compare now.
Okay. Good save.
Yep. He ran some simulations to look at whether a high voltage undersea cable from a Northern Territory to Indonesia would make sense. And actually, I think Indonesia is probably a better market. It's a much bigger market than Singapore. It's a little bit closer. Of course, you don't have the same political alliances that we do with Singapore. There's a little bit of friction between Australia and Indonesia. So, the politics would be the big challenge there. But we ran that simulation and it was cost effective. So it made sense. The quality of the renewable resources in Northern Territory was such that the additional cost of having to build the high voltage DC power line was offset. Indonesia does not have good wind resources. The solar resources are okay, but because it's quite cloudy, been in the middle of the tropics. You actually get much better solar resources if you go just a little bit further south in Northern Territory.
And so it's not quite dead in the water, but it's not going ahead at full steam, that one.
I haven't heard much about it for a while. I think the problem was when they proposed it, it was too big, it was too much.
Right.
And they need to figure out a way to do it in phased approaches. And so I think what's happening at the moment is they're looking at much smaller scale to essentially just power Darwin to start off with, and then look at building the HVDC cable, high voltage DC cable to Singapore.
This might be a really stupid question, but what are the reasons why we wouldn't build, 3 giant solar farms in Northern Territory, the Gobi Desert, and the Sahara or something, and that's it? World's done. Obviously, I'm sure I know that the answers are complex, political, economic, scale, etc. But is that in any way feasible, or is that nonsense?
So there's a project that was, the idea's been around for quite a long time, and the China State Grid picked it up and ran with it with a project called the Global Electricity Interconnection Collaboration something or other. It was a crazy long acronym.
They need an acronym.
Yeah, it was GuideCo was what it...
GuideCo.
GEIDCO, and I forget what all the letters stand for. Anyway, it's this idea that you have a globally interconnected electricity grid using ultra-high voltage DC power lines. And so you do have really big solar farms in these very sunny parts around the world. And then when it's not sunny on your side of the world, you're importing that power from the other side of the planet. And when it's winter in your hemisphere, you're importing power from the other hemisphere. So this globally interconnected renewable energy system.
That's a nice idea. I like that.
It's a really cool idea. The problem is it comes back to the same challenges we've had with fossil fuel and oil, is that you become reliant on your neighbors or other countries for your energy supply.
That would be also a great thing. Like, imagine if, a little bit off topic here, but one of my pet kind of subjects is the European Union, right? Which is,
know this one.
So the European Union is a tool for post Second World War, a way of enshrining such economic, cultural, and political interconnectedness that it would just be an absolutely crazy idea to have another war between France and Germany. That's why the European Union exists. And it's a huge success. Imagine if it is.
Unless you're Great Britain.
Well, I mean, we talked about the densely populated Great Britain earlier. I'd call it the dense population.
Ooh.
Because they're stupid enough to leave the European Union, which is a great initiative. And so my point is, imagine having a world that was totally reliant upon each other for power and energy. So they couldn't fall out.
That I agree, but just looking at current state of affairs and how the Ukraine war made everything spike, and that is it's a devastating war. It's just one part of the world, and that's just throwing everything out. And how could we it works for most of Western Europe, but how would it? I just can't see it happening for the rest of the world. There's the cultures and the beliefs and the ideologies are just so disparate. Energy
independence is still something that most countries
aspire to.
And if they can't get it, they have to have political alliances to ensure their energy supplies, and that's...
And sometimes those political alliances surely change. Like, you might get along with the country for a while and suddenly they turn out to be jerks. And
that's exactly what happened in Western Europe. Like Germany was kind of turning a blind eye to Putin because they were reliant on Russian natural gas.
Yeah.
And messy.
Wasn't Angela Merkel a KGB agent?
This conspiracy theories. Welcome to Totally Cooked.
She was from East Berlin, so.
Well, but there's other people from East Berlin that aren't probably people that we work with.
Like I'm basing this on well-researched facts. No, I've got no idea.
Do you know if you're being serious or not?
No, so someone did mention the other day, because Germany's willingness to buy Russian gas for a very long time. People noticed that Angela and Vladimir were getting along quite well.
Do we have anyone in the centre from East Germany? Perhaps anyone listening at home?
She's not part of the centre, but Katrine Meissner from CCRC.
I'm being very facetious. Christian.
Christian. Of course.
You think that there might be a KGB
Christian, agent? I know you're listening right now, and I also deeply believe that you are not a KGB GRU agent.
He used to tell us, he told a story about when the Berlin Wall came down, and they used to live really close to it. In East Berlin. Yeah, interesting, fascinating stuff.
Well, Christian will be coming on the show in the future to talk about clouds, but maybe
he won't be now. We'll be talking about being a KGB agent.
Well, we'll be asking him about how meteorology research was done in East Germany.
Yeah, right.
Yep, I think that'd be quite
And
interesting.
didn't abide by the wall.
Abide by the wall?
Or like the weather, like wouldn't just go, oh, sorry, that's east west, pull in. It's going to stop right here.
To be continued in another episode on another day. How much? So we've talked a lot about solar. How much plans do we have to scale up both hydro and wind in Australia? Like, what's the outlook looking like there?
Well, it's interesting you use the word plan because there actually is no plan.
Cool.
The energy system in Australia is privatised. It's a free market. And so all of the wind and solar farms are built by private industry with equity funding, debt funding. It's unusual for the government to actually build a wind or a solar farm. They put incentives in. So you have a renewable energy target. We've got the CIS, the Capacity Investment Scheme at the moment, which is providing financial incentives for that. But because the government chose in the late 90s to privatise the electricity sector, they no longer have control over it, and so they can't plan specifically for it.
That was a smart move. I remember, like, I was a kid in the 90s, and I remember seeing that on TV, obviously having no idea and going, oh, so what? But it was a jerk move.
The logic was that industry will run the energy sector more efficiently because they're focused on profits rather than the public sector that is bureaucratic and runs very inefficiently.
Well, they didn't see climate change happening, did they? They should have, because we were talking about it back in the 90s, but yeah.
Right. It was a logical argument. It kind of made sense at the time. Obviously, they got it through, so they were able to convince enough people. The problem is when you're profit motivated, you're running these systems to make as much money as possible rather than providing the cheapest electricity you can to consumers. So you've got immediately a conflict there between the owners of the power stations and the consumers. But that's a natural market. You know, every sector, whether it's food or transport, it's all trying to, investors are trying to make money and consumers are trying to get the best value.
Well, like, we all do it, right? Like we all look at our power bills and work out, can we save more money, get a better deal? So, yeah.
As someone who's, intimately familiar with this sector, if I could wave a magic wand and Anthony Albanese woke up tomorrow and nationalised the grid, and decided that Australia was going to become a renewable energy superpower and invested, sunk us deep into an enormous national deficit, spending trillions on various pie-in-the-sky things that we've talked about today, would you say that's a good idea or a bad idea?
It's a good idea. If you have we use the term benevolent dictator running the system, so someone responsible for the show who had consumers' best interests at heart, that would be ideal because you could then look at where the best places to build wind and solar and new hydro projects and transmission lines, and you could build the most optimal system. And that would be ideal. And you could do it in a systematic, planned fashion so that you transitioned away from the existing coal-fired infrastructure to a renewable system without disruption.
Yep, because, we're joking about East Germany and the Soviet Union and things, but I think that there's a strong case at the moment for a kind of command economy, national strategy approach. It doesn't have to be forever, but like a public-private split model where the government can say, look, you guys, you've not shown the vision or the cooperation required to deal with this problem at scale. This will create jobs. This will create, infrastructure, capacity.
Jobs and growth.
Literally though, actual jobs and growth. Yeah. Like this is what I've been thinking for the last 10 years or so is that no left of center politician in the developed world has had the courage or the bravery or the vision to solve the problem of the climate crisis with an economic solution, like a kind of New Deal scale. Let's just pump a load of made up government money into this. Because national deficits they're like football transfers. It's not real money. It's just the line on a Big Four spreadsheet. So why doesn't someone think big and take it on that way? I'd love to see that.
Well, when you're asking that question of Roger, I was like thinking, gosh, that sounds like a bit of a dictatorship, but maybe that's what we need right now. And I didn't realise there was a term, benevolent dictator. And it's, we just need someone to make a hard decision and have the guts to stick to it.
Problem in politics is people make big calls, and we had a price on carbon in 2012. And that destroyed the Labor Party.
If
at the time,
benevolent dictator Anthony Albanese's national renewable energy project, if it was paying all the tradies in all the tradies $300,000 a year to lay concrete, then they would keep voting for Labor. The LNP would have nowhere to go.
Well, they have to scrap net zero, so.
good luck to them.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, watch that shit burn down.
Probably shouldn't stray too far into politics.
Well, actually, it's funnily enough, I have the next item on my run sheet.
Can I, before we go down that path, I just want to ask.
Interrupting the natural segue, that's fine.
It always interrupting. You talked about us not having a plan in terms of renewable energy moving forward. But there was something, was it the National Energy Market Operator released something last year?
The Integrated System Plan, the ISP.
Yes,
this comes out every 2 years.
Okay.
It is a on-paper plan, but it has no, what's the right word? I mean, it has no authority. It can't say solar farms must be built in these areas at these times. Yeah, it's just saying, if it'd be nice if these wind and solar farms would be built, but they have no financial mechanism to make it happen.
And they have no authority to make it happen? Or?
They have no authority. And,
that's disappointing.
But it is supposed to be a document that supports policy to assist that plan to happen.
Okay. So it's a good step in the right direction, but it's not the silver bullet.
So one of the big problems we had with the energy transition when we first started looking at this was engineers, especially the ones operating the power systems of the day, would say you can't run an electricity system with more than 10 or 20% variable renewables. It'll crash. We don't know how to do it. And so by building these plans, which comes from the system operator, which are the people who know intimately how the system works, to demonstrate that in fact, yes, it is technically and economically feasible to go to 100% or close to 100% renewables by 2050 or hopefully sooner. It removes a lot of the apprehension around going for a target which previously people thought was unattainable.
Yeah, okay.
So now that we know it's absolutely doable, there's nothing, there are no tools that we need to get to 100% renewables.
We have it all.
That don't exist already. So everything is there.
Yeah, just got to do it.
And in fact, there will probably be new inventions that will make it easier and more cost effective as we move forward. But so the latest thing that's becoming available is what we call grid forming inverters, which provides synthetic inertia into the grid so that batteries can maintain frequency stability.
Can you break that down a bit further?
Okay. So our electricity grid runs on AC.
Yeah.
So it's oscillating up and down. The voltage oscillates between positive and negative 50 times a second. That's our 50 hertz. And that's how our power system runs, as opposed to DC, which it could have been a DC system, but Edison and Westinghouse duked it out 100 years ago.
There's a bad movie about it, The Current War.
Yeah.
With who's in that? Have you seen that? I've seen that. You keep talking. I'm going to look.
I haven't seen it. Tesla is in there as well.
But why did we use other than them making bad decisions?
So when you transmit AC power, you don't lose as much power over distance. When you transmit DC, you have quite high losses until you get up to really, really high voltages, which 120, 30 years ago when these decisions were being made wasn't available. Yeah. So, and it's a bit like which side of the road you drive on. Once you've gone AC, it's extremely difficult to change. So anyway, we've got AC current oscillating up and down at 50 hertz a second. That 50 hertz is exactly the same across the entire eastern seaboard in Australia.
Right.
The oscillations to the nearest 50th of a second are exactly the same in South Australia as they are in Queensland.
Yeah.
Exactly the same. And they have to be, otherwise the system breaks.
Yeah.
And the thing that provides the stability of that frequency is large rotating metal masses, the turbines in coal-fired power stations, hydropower stations. As we start to shut down all the coal-fired power stations, we're losing that heavy rotational mass, the inertia, that keeps the frequency stable.
Right.
And so one of the arguments was we can't run a system without spinning mass, without the big hydro coal-fired turbine. Clever power systems engineers have said, actually, we can do this with power electronics.
Yeah.
And we can build an inverter with no moving parts that actually cycles the voltage and forces it to a certain frequency and does it with power electronics rather than actual physical rotating mass.
Okay, all right.
Now, no one's quite ready to run a system 100% with synthetic inertia. They're these grid-forming inverters, but we're talking about doing it in South Australia, which is the sort of canary in the coal mine for high penetration renewable energy systems. Yeah. Because they've run at 100% of their demand with renewables, but also with some gas-fired generators still running in the background to keep the system stable. Yeah. Yeah. They're talking about maybe running some experiments where they turn the gas-fired generators off and see if they can go to 100% renewables.
Go South Australia. That's amazing. Yep.
If anyone cares about DC and AC,
Not really.
the current war is 2017 film. Benedict Cumberbatch plays Edison.
I don't mind him.
And Michael Shannon is Westinghouse.
Yeah.
And Nicholas Hoult from About a Boy. And the X-Men films is Tesla. And
this is a recent movie.
It's 2017.
Yeah.
Almost 10 years.
Yeah.
It only got 33% on Rotten Tomatoes,
Right.
and I thought it was disappointing because it's a really interesting story and they didn't really do it very well. But, thanks, producer Zach, for the IMDb link, and watch it at some point.
Another movie that I watch with my daughter that she'll reject.
Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't show it to her.
Okay. I showed her The Princess Bride on the weekend because she was sick. And she's like, Mum, I don't like this. This is terrible. I'm like, what have you done to one of my favourite childhood movies? I was almost in tears. I was so disappointed.
What's the word he uses? Outstanding. No.
As you wish.
I love that movie, but I can't remember the catchphrase.
Mandy Patinkin. Hello, my name is Amigo Matoya.
Yes.
You killed my father.
Prepare to die.
Producer Zach here. This is part 1 of 2 speaking with Roger about all things energy, so fear not. We will be back next episode for part 2. Thanks for listening.